They say history is written by the victors, but what if the truth was buried with the fallen? Every secret leaves a trace, if you know where to look. This is The Broken Truth, decoding history, one broadcast at a time. The Broken Truth podcast, where history meets conspiracy. Every case tells a story, every story hides a lie. What if the greatest civilization ever to walk the earth never made it into our history books? What if humanity reached the heights of science, engineering, astronomy, long before the pyramids, long before Sumer, long before the world we think of as the beginning? What if our ancestors didn't just survive a global cataclysm, but remembered it, encoded it in myth, stone, and scripture, so that one day, when we were ready, we might fully understand what we lost? An empire beyond comprehension, technology modern science can't replicate, a catastrophe powerful enough to erase a continent, and a warning whispered across time. Tonight we explore Atlantis, not the cartoon, not the new age fantasy, but the possibility that humanity lived through a forgotten chapter of history and buried it under ocean myths and classified archives. Because sometimes what sinks doesn't die, it waits. Welcome back to Season 2 of the Broken Truth podcast. Before we explore the Watchers, the Nephilim, and the Divine Bloodlines, we must begin with the world that came before the flood, before Genesis, before recorded time. Because every mythology, from Greece to India, from the Maya to ancient Egypt, speaks of a golden age, a world ruled by gods, a humanity that lived with impossible knowledge, and a catastrophic reset that wiped it all away. This is the lost empire of Atlantis, the civilization before history. My name is Garrett, and tonight we're going to walk a razor's edge between archaeology, myth, geology, and conspiracy, not to escape reality, but to expand it. Now let's begin. Nearly every mainstream historian will tell you that Atlantis began as a story, a philosophical allegory written by Plato around 360 BC. They'll tell you he made it up to teach his students about morality, hubris, virtue, and the fall of nations. But if you actually read Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, a different picture emerges. Plato doesn't present Atlantis like a metaphor. He presents it like a historical record. He describes its geography, its government, its engineering, its temples, its military, its water systems, its vast concentric ring capital city, its incredible technological advancement. And most importantly, he claims the story came from Solon, the great Athenian statesman, who learned it directly from Egyptian priests in Sais. Plato even gives a date, 9,000 years before Solon's time, which places Atlantis around 11,600 years ago, a date that perfectly matches the end of the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden global climate catastrophe. Coincidence? Maybe. But as we peel back layers of history, geology, and myth, a strange pattern forms. Plato uses unusual precision. He didn't describe Atlantis the way he described fictional allegories. He described it the way Herodotus described Egypt, with measurements, with distances, with political hierarchy and economic system. Egyptian priests told Solon the Greeks had forgotten their own past. Solon is told directly, "You Greeks are children. You remember nothing of the catastrophes that came before." The Egyptians claimed their civilization preserved records from before the flood. If true, then Atlantis wasn't a Greek myth. It was an inherited memory. Plato died before finishing the story. Critias breaks off abruptly mid-sentence. Some historians treat this like a quirk. Others find it suspicious, especially because later writers, Proclus, Plutarch, Strabo, all confirm that Plato believed Atlantis was real. No ancient critic accused Plato of fabricating Atlantis. This is critical. If Atlantis were obviously fake, other philosophers would have mocked him for it. They did not. Not once. Not ever. The silence is deafening. So what did Plato describe? He spoke of a civilization beyond the pillars of Heracles, the modern Strait of Gibraltar, advanced in engineering and seafaring, powerful enough to threaten the entire Mediterranean. A civilization that fell in a single horrific day and night of earthquakes, floods, and fire. A tale suspiciously similar to global flood myths told on every continent. Here's where the hybrid documentary approach becomes essential. We're not asking, was Atlantis real exactly as Plato described it? The better question is, why did dozens of ancient cultures preserve nearly identical stories of a lost world destroyed by water? And why does modern geology show a cataclysm at the exact time Plato gives? Before we even mention Atlantis again, we need to understand something profound. Human civilization is older and more complex than we were taught. The traditional archaeological timeline tells you civilization begins around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. Farming begins around 10,000 years ago. Anything before that is primitive hunter-gatherers. But this model is collapsing. Göbekli Tepe changed everything. Discovered in Turkey, dated to 11,600 years ago, the exact date Plato gives for Atlantis' destruction. Göbekli Tepe wasn't a village. It wasn't even a city. It was a massive, megalithic, astronomically aligned stone complex built by people who were told lacked agricultural, writing, tools, and engineering. It predates Stonehenge by 7,000 years. It predates the pyramids by nearly 8,000. Its builders carved 20-ton pillars with reliefs so intricate, modern sculptors struggle to replicate. Mainstream archaeology responded by saying, okay, civilization is older than we thought. But what if Göbekli Tepe wasn't the beginning? What if it was the rebuilding? A memory? A monument to a world lost? Around the same time, the Earth nearly died. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, once fringe, now has powerful evidence. Microsphere rules, melt glass, platinum anomalies, worldwide charcoal layers, massive megafaunal die-offs, sudden sea level rise, extinction events, global temperature spikes followed by rapid cooling. Something happens, something global, something violent. An asteroid? A comet fragment swarm? A solar burst? Crust displacement event? Whatever it was, it wiped out much of life on Earth and ended whatever cultures existed before recorded history began. Every culture remembers the event, and they all describe it the same way. A golden age, a fall, a flood, a reset. The Sumerians wrote it, the Egyptians recorded it, the Maya encoded it, the Vedic text preserves it, the Bible repeats it. Even the Hopi, Navajo, and Polynesians tell the same story. Could they all be remembering the same lost civilization? And could that memory have been simplified into the word Atlantis? To even consider Atlantis as a real civilization, we need to look at the physical evidence left behind on Earth. Evidence that should not exist if humanity was primitive before 6,000 years ago. And yet, the ancient world is littered with anomalies that defy our current technological timeline. Megaliths that weigh hundreds of tons, stone blocks shaped with such precision that even modern laser cutters struggle to match them. Structures aligned to celestial bodies with accuracy measured in fractions of a degree. All around the world, we see signs of a lost engineering culture, one that operated on principles we still don't understand. Let's explore a few of the most important. Baalbek, the 1,000-ton stones no one can lift today. In Lebanon stands one of the greatest engineering puzzles on the Trilithon. 3 stone blocks weighing between 750 and 1,000 tons each. Some claim the Romans built Baalbek, but Romans never moved stones anywhere near this size, not before and not after. Even today, only a handful of modern cranes exist that could theoretically lift blocks of this magnitude, and none of them could transport them across uneven terrain. Yet the Baalbek stones are not only transported, they're perfectly leveled and aligned. The base platform is so precise that the entire structure above it has remained stable for millennia. So who built the foundation? Romans built on top of it, but the foundation itself appears far older. Much like Plato described, we find evidence of a technologically advanced culture, a sudden break in the archaeological timeline, impossibly large stone construction, a rebuilding civilization using earlier megalithic work. Could Baalbek be the remains of an Atlantean outpost? Or the reconstruction is something that stood long before the Romans ever arrived? The pyramids, a technology we still don't understand. The Great Pyramid is often dismissed as a tomb, but no mummy was found in it, no inscriptions, no religious symbolism typical of Egyptian funerary structures. Instead, we find sonic resonance chambers, granite boxes carved from a single block, alignments to Orion's belt, cardinal directions aligned within 3/60ths of a degree, a base that is perfectly level across a 13-acre footprint. Blocks weighing up to 80 tons lifted 200 feet in the air. This was not trial and error stonework. This was advanced engineering. And many Egyptologists, quietly off record, admit the engineering techniques remain a mystery. Add to this a growing body of evidence suggesting water erosion patterns on the Sphinx enclosure, a construction date potentially pushed back to 10,500 BCE, knowledge of precessional astronomy encoded within the layout. If true, the pyramids may not have been built after the flood, but in the final centuries before it. A remnant of the same knowledge Plato attributed to Atlantis, a civilization skilled in geometry, astronomy, hydrology, and energy. Megalithic South America, evidence of lost machining. Peru and Bolivia contain stonework so precise it feels like science fiction. At Sacsayhuaman, interlocking blocks weighing up to 200 tons fit together with such precision that a razor blade cannot slide between them. At Ollantaytambo, diorite stones, harder than steel, were shaped as though the builders worked with tools that could melt or vibrate stone. At Pumapunku, we find the famous H-blocks, machine-like carvings with perfect right angles, drill holes, interlocking channels, and geometric symmetries that match modern industrial tolerances. All of this appears abruptly. No earlier developmental stages. No simpler prototypes. Just fully formed mastery. Exactly what Plato described. An advanced civilization whose knowledge was passed down in fragments to the cultures that survived the cataclysm. The global pattern, the same fingerprint everywhere. Whether we're in Egypt, Peru, Mexico, Lebanon, Japan, Turkey, Indonesia, Malta, Easter Island, Sardinia, we see the same recurring theme. Cyclopean masonry, earthquake-resistant engineering, astronomical alignments, sudden disappearance of builders, civilizations reborn on top of older ruins. It's as if a global network of megalithic knowledge vanished overnight. The survivors, or the cultures they later educated, tried to rebuild, but they lacked the full understanding of the techniques. Which leads us to the next act. If Atlantis existed, was it a single city, or something much bigger? Plato describes Atlantis as an island empire, but its power wasn't limited to one landmass. He claims Atlantis ruled lands in the Atlantic, islands throughout the ocean, part of North Africa, parts of Europe, everything reaching as far as Egypt and Italy. This suggests a civilization with long-distance ships, advanced navigation, trade routes across oceans. And here's the shocking part. Ancient maritime capability might have been far more advanced than textbooks admit. The ocean currents themselves preserve the memory. If you dropped a vessel into the Atlantic with nothing but basic steering ability, the ocean would carry it along predictable paths. The Canary Current, North Equatorial Current, the Gulf Stream, Brazil Current, these are the same currents modern sailors use to rediscover the Americas. Ancient mariners would not need modern technology to navigate long distances, just an understanding of stars, wind, and seasonal cycles. And nearly every ancient civilization had advanced astronomy long before recorded history. It wasn't impossible for ancient people to cross oceans. It was inevitable. How did so many civilizations build the same structure? The similarities between Old World and New World cultures have been explained away for decades as coincidence. But the overlaps are impossible to ignore. Pyramids on every continent, serpent cults, flood myths, writing systems with similar symbolic patterns, metallurgy emerging suddenly, advanced calendar systems, identical astronomical knowledge. Were these parallel developments, or the remnants of a single seafaring civilization spreading knowledge? When we consider Atlantis, we imagine one capital city sinking into the ocean, but Plato describes it as an empire. Just like the British Empire influenced India and Africa, a civilization before the flood could have seeded knowledge across the globe. The world grid theory. Researchers have noticed that ancient megalithic sites are not randomly scattered. Instead, they appear along a global pattern, often aligned along energy-rich geological fractures or electromagnetic anomalies. These include the Great Pyramid, Easter Island, Nazca, Angkor Wat, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, the Bermuda region. Atlantis theories often begin here. Is this confirmation of a global civilization? Or did ancient cultures all independently discover the same energetic hotspot? Either way, the pattern suggests an understanding of Earth's geometry far beyond the capabilities of hunter-gatherers. Ancient maps that should not exist. The Piri-Reis map, drawn in 1513, from older source maps, shows Antarctica's coastline without ice. The Andes accurately proportioned. Latitude and longitude calculated centuries before their invention. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531 also shows an ice-free Antarctica, with rivers and mountain ranges matching modern satellite imagery. Where did these cartographers get their data? Certainly not from European exploration. Piri-Reis himself claimed the maps were copies of older ancient charts from civilizations long lost. If true, the Atlanteans may have mapped Earth long before the Ice Age ended. The Atlantis Network Hypothesis. If Atlantis wasn't one island, but a civilization, with capital cities, colonies, outposts, ports, trade hubs, and a maritime network connecting them across the globe, just like the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Vikings, Polynesians, but thousands of years earlier. This explains why megalithic technology appears globally, why flood myths are universal, why ancient maps show coastlines from a warmer world, why astronomical knowledge explodes suddenly after 10,000 BCE, why so many cultures say their knowledge came from gods across the sea. Because they weren't gods. They were survivors or emissaries of a civilization wiped out in a cataclysm. A civilization the Greeks preserved under one name, Atlantis. If Atlantis was real, then at some point it had to die. Plato describes this moment with chilling simplicity. In a single day and night of misfortune. But geology, climatology, and global mythologies paint a much more violent and comprehensive picture. One of the greatest disasters ever to hit Earth. Because around 11,600 years ago, a catastrophic event reshaped the planet in ways our species had never seen. This wasn't a slow climate shift. It was a global shockwave, a reset, a near extinction level event. And if a high civilization existed before this catastrophe, Atlantis, or something like it never stood a chance. Let's explore what the science and myth tells us. The Younger Dryas impact theory. Science catches up to myth. For decades, mainstream geology dismissed the idea of sudden global cataclysms. Catastrophes didn't fit the narrative of slow, gradual change. But then the evidence began to pile up. Glass melt droplets, nanodiamonds, high-temperature spherules, massive charcoal layers, platinum anomalies, shocked quartz. These materials indicate extreme heat, far beyond what volcanic activity can produce. We're talking temperatures high enough to melt the Earth's surface. Evidence appears across 4 continents. What caused it? A massive swarm of comet fragments, or an enormous airburst event, or multiple impacts across the northern hemisphere. This aligns perfectly with Plato's timeline. Sea levels rose 400 feet. When the Ice Age collapsed, melting ice sheets released an unimaginable flood of water. Globally, sea levels rose over 400 feet. Entire coastlines vanished. Millions of square miles of land disappeared. Continents reshaped. Oceans expanded. If Atlantis was a maritime empire built near the water, it would have been erased from the map. Literally, Atlantis didn't just sink. The oceans swallowed entire civilizations. Underwater surveys now reveal ruins off India, ruins off Japan, ruins off Cuba, off Malta, off Greece, off the Bahamas, off Cambodia, all dated to the end of the Ice Age, the exact period Plato gives. Coincidence, or the remnants of an entire world that drowned? Volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis, a planet in revolt. As ice caps melted, the sudden release of mass caused massive geological instability. Tectonic plates shifted, fault lines snapped, volcanoes erupted, mega tsunamis swept across the coast. Geologists now suspected that waves may have reached hundreds of feet in height, possibly over 1,000 feet in extreme cases. Imagine the destruction of a global maritime civilization. No warning, no time to escape. For Plato to say Atlantis fell in a single day and night isn't poetic exaggeration. It's historically plausible. The flood myths, a global eyewitness record. Every culture on Earth describes a flood. Not many floods, one flood. A world-ending cataclysm that happened long before their own time. Examples: the Bible. The foundations of the deep burst forth. The Sumerians. The The gods flood the world to reset humanity. Sorry to interrupt your regularly scheduled podcast, but this episode is brought to you by the Broken Truth merch. Support the show. Wear the truth. Official Broken Truth podcast merch is live now. Links in the description. And since you've made it this far in the episode, comment hashtag Broken Truth and leave us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. Because when you speak up, the algorithm listens. And so does the world. The Maya, a world destroyed by water. The Hapi, a flood that ended the Third World. The Greeks, the Deucalion and Pyrrha survived the deluge. The Chinese, Emperor Yao battles the Great Flood. The Norse, the world drowned by Ymir's blood. The Polynesians, an island kingdom swallowed by the ocean. Cultures separated by oceans, languages, and thousands of years described the exact same global cataclysm. This isn't mythology, it's memory. A memory of the same event Plato attributes to Atlantis' destruction. What if Atlantis didn't just sink? What if it burned first? New research suggests the Younger Dryas event began with global firestorm, airbursts in the atmosphere, a massive temperature spike, flash melting, continent-sized wildfires. Imagine the sky turning white, the atmosphere igniting, the ocean surging, the earth quaking. Plato's day and night of misfortune takes on a new meaning. Atlantis didn't die quietly, it died violently. And the survivors, if there were any, would have been scattered across the world, forced to rebuild civilization from ashes and ruin. Which brings us to the next act. Here's where things get compelling, because ancient cultures didn't just speak of a global flood. They spoke of survivors. Beings who arrived after the flood. Strangers with advanced knowledge. Civilizers, teachers, architects, astronomers, agriculturalists. People who appeared out of nowhere and transformed humanity. What if these weren't gods, but refugees? The last heirs of Atlantis. Egypt, the followers of Horus. Egyptian priests told Solon the story of Atlantis, but they also told him something else. Their civilization was not the first. It was a rebuilding. Egyptian legend speaks of Zentepi, the first time, a golden age before the flood, god kings who ruled before dynastic Egypt, survivors who brought knowledge of agricultural astronomy and writing. The builder gods Thoth, Osiris, and Horus were not described as metaphors. They were described as kings who arrived after a catastrophe. Exactly what you'd expect if survivors of a destroyed civilization settled in Egypt. Mesopotamia and the 7 sages. The Sumerians wrote that after the Great Flood, 7 beings arrived by sea. They taught humanity irrigation, governance, mathematics, astronomy, writing, temple construction. They came from across the ocean, just like Plato's Atlantean. They were called the Apkallu, depicted with half-fish symbolism, advanced tools, knowledge of the stars, and an appearance unlike ordinary humans. Were they gods? Or remnants of a lost maritime civilization? Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, and the bearded gods. Across the Atlantic, we see the same pattern. The Maya, Aztecs, and Olmecs speak of a pale-skinned, bearded teacher named Quetzalcoatl, who came from across the ocean, brought laws, brought writing, taught astronomy, introduced agriculture, then left with a promise to return. The Inca had a similar figure, Viracocha. Again, a teacher, a civilizer, a survivor. Look at the descriptions. Tall, light-skinned, bearded, technologically advanced, arriving after a global disaster. This doesn't match the local population. It matches Plato's account of Atlanteans. India, the flood survivor Manu. In ancient Vedic texts, a flood destroys the world. A survivor named Manu preserves knowledge. Civilization restarts because he remembers the ways of the old world. He brings sacred geometry, agriculture, and astronomy. The Vedas also describe previous civilizations destroyed in cycles, a concept identical to Plato's world ages. Again, the fingerprints align. Polynesia, the navigators from a sunken homeland. Throughout Polynesia, legends speak of a homeland swallowed by the ocean, survivors fleeing in ships, a civilization that once spanned the world. Long-distance navigators known as the Long-Ear People. Sound familiar? A maritime civilization destroyed by rising seas, the survivors rebuilding island by island, Atlantis reimagined across the Pacific. The survivors became the seeds of civilization. Look at the sudden explosion of knowledge after 10,000 BCE. Domesticated plants, calendar systems, agriculture, megalithic architecture, astronomy, pottery, animal domestication. It happens globally and almost simultaneously. That isn't how civilizations normally develop, but it is exactly what you'd expect if small groups of advanced survivors traveled across the world sharing fragments of a lost science. Atlantis didn't end, it scattered. If a global civilization collapsed, the amount of knowledge lost would have been immeasurable, but not everything vanished. Some knowledge survived, carefully protected by priesthoods, mystery schools, and esoteric traditions that claim their wisdom came from an age before the flood. Let's explore the lineages that may trace back to Atlantis. Egypt's priesthood, the last guardians of the first civilization. The priests of Sais told Solon the story of Atlantis because they believed the Greeks had forgotten their past. Egyptians weren't arrogant. They were stating a fact. Their lineage preserved pre-flood knowledge. Their temples, their astronomical alignments, their mathematics all claim to originate from a time before the world reset. Thoth, the god of wisdom, is said to have written tens of thousands of scrolls about the world before the flood. Were these metaphorical, or were they records of a forgotten age? The mystery schools, echoes of a lost science. The Greek mystery schools, Eleusinian, Orphic, Pythagorean, all traced their teachings back to Egypt. Pythagoras spent 22 years in Egyptian temples. He emerged with knowledge that seemed almost supernatural. Sacred geometry, vibrational harmonics, astronomical cycles, mathematical ratios. Where did the Egyptians get their knowledge? Again, the answer always points backward, to Zentepi, the first time, the age destroyed by a great flood. The Atlantean Age, Hermeticism, the survivor's philosophy. The Hermetic texts claim they were written by Thoth and Hermes Trismegistus, a being who lived before the flood. They describe the structure of the cosmos, the relationship between mind and matter, the geometry of creation, the cycles of civilization, the hidden energy within all things. These teachings appear suddenly in the ancient world without precursor, almost like they were salvaged from an older collapsed civilization. The Druids, the Maya, and the Pacific navigated. Across the world, secret classes of priests served the same role, preserving oral histories, memorizing astronomical cycles, tracking planetary movements, maintaining sacred geometry, guarding high knowledge. The Druids were said to have knowledge older than Egypt. The Maya tracked Venus with accuracy. NASA only confirmed recently. The Polynesian navigators crossed thousands of miles using star maps passed down through generations. Where did all this knowledge come from? It didn't evolve locally. It survived globally. Why so much was hidden? If these groups possessed ancient scientific knowledge, why hide it? Well, the answer is simple. After the flood, the world was chaotic. Humanity was traumatized. Warlords, empires, and early kings fought to control any scrap of power. Knowledge became dangerous. Those who held it became targets. So it was preserved through symbols, myths, rituals, geometry, oral traditions, encoded, encrypted, and protected. The story of Atlantis was one of these preserved memories, not meant as fantasy, but as a warning. A warning repeated by every ancient civilization. When humanity forgets its past, it is doomed to repeat it. If a civilization existed before the flood, as advanced or even more advanced than early Egypt or Sumer, what kind of technology did they possess? Not iPhones, not circuit boards, not skyscrapers. Something older, something more elegant, something built into the natural world. Ancient texts, myths, and megalithic architecture all point to technological paradigm based not on combustion engines or electricity, but on acoustics, electromagnetism, harmonics, astronomy, geology, water pressure, piezoelectric stone, planetary energy lines. This was technology that worked with the Earth, not against it. Let's explore the possibilities of what Atlantis may have mastered. Energy through stone, harmonics, and resonance. Around the world, ancient structures yield unusual acoustic properties. The King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid resonates at 440 to 480 Hz. Chauvin de Huantar in Peru uses stone channels to create thunder-like roars. Maltese hypogeums create infrasonic frequencies. Göbekli Tepe pillars channel sound vibration. These weren't architectural accidents. They were intentional. Many structures behave like resonant cavities, tuning forks, amplifiers, harmonic chambers. The ancients seemed obsessed with frequencies. Plato even wrote that Atlantis used orichalcum, a mysterious metal that glowed with a fiery radiance, possibly a reference to a conductive alloy. Were these people using resonant energy fields? Piezoelectric properties of quartz-rich stone, acoustic levitation. Modern labs have demonstrated that sound waves can levitate objects, shape granular materials, and influence water power. All technologies that ancients may have explored. Water engineering, hydrology at a level we can't explain. Water, pressurized, channeled, filtered, and vibrated, is found at the heart of many ancient sites. Consider the Great Pyramid's subterranean water table chamber, the massive hydraulic channels beneath Pumapunku, the aquifers directly under the Sphinx, the step wells of India, the water temples of Indonesia, ancient baths aligned to celestial makers. Water wasn't just for drinking. It was used to regulate temperature, to enhance acoustics, to amplify energy, to cleanse vibration, to power something. Modern engineers have proposed that ancient structures may have functioned as water pumps, resonant energy generators, stabilization systems, seismic dampers. If Atlantis was truly an advanced city, water would have been one of its prime technologies. Plato described it clearly: a city built on concentric rings of land and water, with a powerful central temple shining like fire. This wasn't primitive, it was engineered. Astronomy, a mastery that shouldn't exist. Before compasses, before telescopes, before mathematics as we know it, ancient people tracked precession, aligned monuments to solstices, understood axial tilt, created star maps accurate to modern standards, encoded astronomical cycles into architecture. Why? Because if you lived through a catastrophe that destroyed the world, you would study the sky relentlessly. Ancient myths describe fire from heaven, stars falling, gods battling in the sky, cosmic serpents striking the earth. These aren't hallucinations. They're records of a cosmic impact event. Atlantis may have developed early predictive astronomy, knowledge of comet cycles, warnings encoded in temples, knowledge that the post-flood world partially preserved. Metallurgy and lost alloys. Atlantis was said to shine with orichalcum, a metal that glowed red like fire. Archaeologists recently discovered orichalcum ingots in a shipwreck off Sicily, matching Plato's description almost exactly. It appears to be copper, zinc, charcoal, minerals, possibly rare earth elements. This wasn't primitive smelting. It was advanced metallurgy, just like the Delhi iron pillar, rust-proof for 1600 years, ancient Chinese blast furnaces, pre-Columbian platinum work, advanced metal alloys in ancient Peru. These are fingerprints of a civilization that understood more than we assume. Atlantis technology was earth-based, not industrial. Here's the most important distinction. Atlantis wasn't more advanced in the sense of having microchips or satellites. They were advanced in another direction. Their technological paradigm likely involved crystalline libraries, harmonic energy, megalithic architecture, water pressure systems, acoustically tuned stone, astronomical timing cycles, earth resonance. Imagine if Nikola Tesla had lived 10,000 years ago and his understanding of energy became the foundation of civilization. That might have been Atlantis. A civilization built on natural energy principles, not combustion or circuitry. A civilization lost not just to time, but to the ocean. If Atlantis was real, why don't we talk about it? Why isn't it in every textbook? Why do archaeologists treat it like a joke? The answer is uncomfortable. Atlantis threatens the timeline that gives authority to religions, governments, empires, academic establishments, cultural narratives, because if we rewrite the beginning of civilization, we rewrite the foundations of power. Let's examine the forces that buried this story. The flood reset humanity and memory itself. After the Younger Dryas catastrophe, humans entered a dark age. Population collapsed, cities vanished, survivors lived in scattered bands. Knowledge was lost, fragmented, and distorted. A civilization once spanned oceans, left behind only ruins and stories. It took thousands of years before humans ever returned to city building. By then, Atlantis has already become a myth. Early empires needed a simple story, When Sumer, Egypt, and Babylon emerged, they presented themselves as the first. It legitimized their kings, their gods, their laws, their authority. No empire wants to admit they inherited knowledge from a greater civilization than their own. So the memory was reframed. Atlantis became the realm of gods, the age of heroes, the mythical first world. Myth replaces history when history becomes politically inconvenient. Religion filled the gaps and controlled the narrative. Major world religions arose after the flood. They each claimed a divine creation moment, a chosen people, a unique revelation. A pre-flood advanced civilization complicates these narratives. So Atlantis was standardized as a myth, reinterpreted through theology, pushed into symbolic storytelling. Religions didn't erase Atlantis out of malice. They simply replaced earlier stories with their own. The age of exploration encountered anomalies and hid them. European explorers in the 1500s discovered ancient ruins in the Americas, astronomical calendars more accurate than Europe's, megalithic structures matching those in the Old World, star maps preserved for thousands of years. This created a problem. How did primitive societies have advanced knowledge? To maintain imperial superiority, colonizers dismissed ancient culture as barbaric, savage, primitive. Anything implying a global ancient civilization had to be minimized or ignored. Atlantis wasn't just forgotten, it was inconvenient. Modern academia has a timeline it refuses to change. The official story says agriculture began 9,000 years ago, cities began 6,000 years ago. Writings began 5,500 years ago. No advanced civilization existed earlier. But Göbekli Tepe, Gunung Padang, ancient ice freeze maps, and underwater ruins break this timeline. Admitting Atlantis would force a massive rewrite of anthropology, archaeology, geology, human evolution, the rise of civilization. Academic institutions don't change easily. They protect the paradigm. Atlantis is a threat to the old story, so it remains a myth. Atlantis was never hidden by conspiracy alone. It was buried by time, trauma, and power. It's not a single cover-up. It's a layer after layer of forgetting and reframing. A global civilization was destroyed. Its survivors spread knowledge. Its memory became myth. Empires rewrote the story. Religions reshaped the story. Academia dismissed the story. But now, for the first time, the evidence has returned, and the story is rising again. But something strange is happening today. Around the world, scientists, historians, and researchers, both mainstream and fringe, are converging on the same conclusion. Human civilization is far older and more advanced than we believe. Let's examine the modern clues. New archaeology is breaking the old timeline. Göbekli Tepe proves civilization existed at 11,600 years ago. Gunung Padang in Indonesia may predate 20,000 BCE. Underwater ruins off Japan, India, and Cuba suggest Ice Age cities. This wasn't supposed to happen. Civilization wasn't supposed to be this old, but now the evidence is too vast to ignore. Geology confirms a catastrophe at the exact time Plato gave. The year of the Younger Dryas, 11,600 years ago, lines up perfectly with the destruction of Atlantis. Modern research shows massive meltwater pulses, comet impact signatures, global wildfires, sudden climate reversal, mega tsunamis. The Earth was struck hard. Plato wasn't guessing. He was recounting memory. Satellite technology is revealing what the ocean hid. LiDAR scans and ocean floor imaging are exposing lost coastlines, submerged cities, geometric structures, artificial platforms, sunken pyramids. The ocean didn't erase history. It protected it. Now we're finally able to see it again. Ancient knowledge systems make sense only if a civilization reboots. Why did ancient cultures start at advanced levels? Why did Sumer suddenly invent writing? Why did Egypt suddenly master engineering? And why did the Maya suddenly know planetary cycles? Peru built megaliths with perfect geometry. The answer's simple. They weren't restarting from zero. They were restarting from memory. The return of the cataclysm cycle. This is perhaps the most critical point. Ancient civilizations didn't just warn about the past. They warned about cycles, cosmic cycles, solar cycles, geological cycles, flood, destruction and rebirth, cycles. Atlantis was not simply a lost civilization. It was a warning, a message encoded in myth, stone, and astronomy. What happened before can happen again. And that's why the truth matters. So what was Atlantis? A city of stone, an island empire, a global maritime civilization, a memory of a world before the flood, a warning carved into the foundation of human history. Maybe it was all of these. But one thing is clear. Humanity is older, wiser, and more resilient than the textbooks say. We've lived through cycles of light and darkness. We've risen and fallen. We've forgotten and remembered. Atlantis is not just a myth, it's a mirror, a reflection of who we were and who we could become. Because if a civilization rose before the flood, if it reached heights we're only now rediscovering, then humanity's story is not linear. It's cyclical, fragile, beautiful, and it's unfinished. As we stand today on the edge of global change, climate shifts, technological upheavals, political storms, the story of Atlantis becomes more than ancient history. It becomes a lesson, a reminder. Civilizations fall when they forget the forces that shape them. Civilizations fall when they become arrogant. Civilizations fall when they lose harmony with the world that sustains them. Atlantis wasn't just lost. It was a warning across time, a message carved in myth, encoded in ruins, whispered through priesthoods, hidden in megaliths, preserved in star maps, and now resurfacing through science. The question isn't whether Atlantis existed. The question is, are we listening? Thank you for joining me on this journey into the lost empire of Atlantis. Once again, my name is Garrett, and this is the Broken Truth Podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay awake, and never stop questioning the stories we were told.
In a world built on hidden histories and half-truths, we've only just begun to peel back the layers. Because what you've heard tonight was never meant to be known, but you were meant to find it. If you're ready to go deeper, leave us a review, comment your thoughts, share this episode, and step inside the archives. Join the inner circle, where the real evidence is kept. This is the broken truth, because the truth isn't whole, it's broken.